Hi everyone, this is Athena from Courage Coaching. Thank you for joining me today. If you are new to my channel, then please click on the subscribe button in order to get notifications for any new videos I upload. In today's video, I wanted to talk about living with complex post-traumatic stress disorder, otherwise known as CPTSD, and I wanted to talk in particular about 7 unusual issues that somebody with CPTSD struggles with. Now, the first sign I wanted to talk about is actually when we rush too much. Now, rushing too much can be a trigger for those of us living with CPTSD. And I would say that nowadays, most of us are rushing around trying to get things done. Most of us lead very busy lives. Most of us try and juggle work, life, and family life. So we are rushing around a lot. Rushing too much is something that a lot of us do, but for those of us with CPTSD, this can be a real trigger. Rushing may have been something that we learned from our parents, so we may have had very impatient parents that were rushing us around all the time, trying to get things done that they wanted done, and we were just innocent bystanders as children and just had to follow them around. Rushing around in general can also be a trigger, even if our parents didn't do this with us, because it activates our hypervigilance, it activates our fight or flight. Sometimes when we are rushing around, we feel that we are in danger. When we were children, we were probably rushing around because we were trying to prevent something bad from happening. Shame is something that can also cause us to rush around. And if we are trying to avoid something, then we will rush around doing lots of other things to distract ourselves. So another unusual CPTSD issue is that we are not able to be alone. We have trouble being on our own, and we cannot cope when there is silence. So silence can be a huge trigger for those of us who were neglected as children. So we may have had parents that left us alone for very long periods of time, and there was no adult in the house, so we were left alone in a very quiet house. And this could have led to feelings of loneliness, hypervigilance, feelings of neglect, that nobody was there for us. And this may also have affected our sleep. So the more alone we were and the less stimulated we were as children, the more we would struggle getting to sleep. So these can both be interconnected. So lack of sleep or tiredness and being completely alone because we were neglected can be huge triggers for those of us with CPTSD. When you were left alone and neglected, being vulnerable enough to fall asleep may have been very scary for us. And silence is also a huge trigger, because if we were left alone a lot in the house and there was nothing going on, silence will have felt very, very lonely, would have felt horrible. We would have felt extremely abandoned emotionally and physically from our parents. So that's why it might be that when you are home alone, you may feel more comfortable when you have the TV on or the radio on or when there's things going on, because this helps you feel less alone, less triggered, less anxious, or less hypervigilant. Number 3, this is something that I have noticed in myself, and it's all about having a delay in processing your emotions. So it might be that you feel that something has happened that has upset you, or something may have happened that you were in denial about. But then a few days later or a week later, this bad thing that happened, the emotions that went with this bad thing suddenly started catching up with you. Dissociation causes us to not actually be fully aware of something that has happened until a few days later. And this happens because we aren't attuned to our emotions. Because we grew up maybe as children only being attuned to our parents' emotions, we find it hard to acknowledge our own emotions. We find it hard understanding what is going on. We might not know what we are feeling from day to day or from moment to moment. So this is something that takes time, and our emotions take time to catch up with us, and we have to be aware of this. So if suddenly you feel that certain emotions have come out of nowhere and something that previously didn't bother you suddenly bothered you at a later date, then that is something that can happen due to the fact that you had abuse or neglect in your childhood, and it is a common symptom of those of us who have CPTSD. Number 4, something that a lot of people struggle with that have had childhood neglect or abuse is that they absolutely hate being the center of attention. In most cases, those of us that had trauma, that had neglect, that weren't listened to, where our feelings weren't validated, where our feelings weren't important, where our whole existence wasn't important, being the center of attention can be extremely triggering, extremely uncomfortable. And it almost feels like we are in danger. So it puts us in this state of hypervigilance. And with CPTSD, being the center of attention means that suddenly we are really, really important. And we're not used to that. We're not comfortable. You know, it's like somebody singing happy birthday, or somebody throwing you a surprise party, or maybe even your wedding day. Maybe getting married is something that you dread because you don't want to be the center of attention. You don't want all these people looking at you when you walk down the aisle. These are all things that I struggled with. I really don't like being the center of attention. And in the past, for instance, when I had birthdays, and I wanted to arrange for friends to come, for a night out on my birthday, I remember how anxious I was. Because on one hand, I really wanted to celebrate my birthday, but on the other hand, I wasn't comfortable with having all the attention from my friends. I just wanted to go out, have a drink or two, and have a good time. But I always found it very difficult. The same goes with things such as presentations. I find presentations excruciatingly difficult, and I'm not comfortable being in these sort of situations because I am the center of attention. So maybe you can relate to this as well. Number 5, another issue with those of us who have CPTSD is that we may cry too much on one hand, or we aren't able to cry at all on the other hand. So you may notice that you're either one or the other, that you either cry so much and when you start crying, you can't stop, or you may notice that you aren't able to cry at all, that you are completely shut down, and that this is something that you've had since you were a child because your parents didn't allow you to cry. You weren't allowed to express any emotions because you were told that showing emotion was weakness. So you may be completely shut down because of this and not feel comfortable crying. On the other hand, there will be individuals who, once they start crying, they cannot stop. In one way, this is good because you are doing something that is healing for you, that is cathartic for you, that helps you self-soothe, that helps you regulate your emotions. That is what crying does. But if you can't stop, this can also be very distressing, very exhausting. So it's one or the other usually. Number 6 is something that I call injustice grief, where you may come across other families that look really happy, where the adult child is with their parents and they're getting on really well, or you may listen in on a conversation where you see that the parents are being really supportive of that child, and you feel this deep feeling of grief, of sadness, that you did not experience this. And you wish that you were that person. You wish that you had had those parents. And this will hit you out of nowhere sometimes. And it may even bring tears to your eyes. It may make you feel really hurt, really angry. These grief moments are triggers. You are triggered by seeing other families happy because this is something you didn't have. And this grief is something that will come out in your life as an adult, especially in moments where it may be something like a celebration, a birthday, a Mother's Day. These are things that happen that you can't control. Lastly, I wanted to talk about the feeling of feeling really raw, really exposed to the outside world. But when you feel raw or exposed, it means that you are constantly worrying that other people are saying bad things about you. So you may arrive at work and walk into the office and you'll immediately feel this rawness, this feeling of being exposed, that all these people have been talking about you behind your back, that all these people think that you're weak or think that you're strange. You have a deep-seated feeling of shame, and because you feel so unworthy, You find it really hard feeling comfortable with other people because you're constantly feeling this shame, this unworthiness. But in actuality, you're not really that important. People aren't actually talking badly of you. People don't actually think anything weird of you. And this feeling of feeling raw and exposed makes you want to hide yourself, makes you want to avoid situations. And a personality disorder that isn't talked about a lot, that is caused by childhood trauma, is avoidant personality. In avoidant personality, individuals have this feeling of feeling really raw and exposed. And because of their low self-worth and their deep-seated feelings of shame, they avoid situations. They avoid any social situations. They don't like taking part in group activities. They don't like working in jobs where they have to, work as a team with other individuals. They hide away. They avoid relationships because they don't want to be ridiculed. They don't want to be hurt. And yeah, that's basically it. That's the list. So if you feel that you can relate to any of these, then please feel free to share your experience in the comments below the video. Thank you very much for listening and watching today. And if you have any questions at all, then please feel free to email me at courageisallyounneed@gmail.com. Take care. Bye.